Hello, and welcome again. This is Amanda Bordelon from Utah Valley University, and this video I'm going to show is how to use Excel to create tables and how to generate graphs and how to manipulate the graphs. I'm going to start here in Excel, and I have a sheet that I'm on. Currently it's on sheet 2, but that doesn't matter as much as long as it's a sheet you can start typing in. And I'm going to start entering some data. Now, a lot of times when you're going to graph something, you need to have some information given to you that you need to present. And in this case, I'm going to kind of make up something for you so you can see what, just to demonstrate the purpose of generating a table and a graph. So I'm going to start with something. We're just going to do a text column here. I'm going to call it group names. And I'm going to make up some names here. So let's say our group has 6 people in it, and I'm going to write their names in here. And then we're going to have, maybe we did a query in our study and we found out a number for each one. Maybe this is their favorite number. So we're going to put those in here and just writing in some numbers that might be their favorite number. All right. And then we can even have, maybe we also asked their age and we ranked them by age. So let's see, that one was the first, this one was the second age, that one was the third, that one's fourth, fifth, and then sixth. Okay. And then we can even have height, maybe not height, yeah, height, inches. Sometimes it's good to have units on these. I'm gonna double click to make these bigger. And let's say, see, 5 feet is about 60 inches, so we'll have them be, we can even make a random generator for a moment here, just to show another function. Random between, there's all kinds of fun functions. Let's say I want them between 54 inches to 73 inches. And I'm going to, one little feature I'm going to introduce on when generating tables is you can also click on this little green box on the bottom right corner of a cell, and you can click and drag down, and it will populate everything below. Now I'm going to actually go over here, and I'm going to hit Control Copy and hit Paste Value, only because when you do a random generator function, every time you click on anything, it updates the random generator. But okay, so I have favorite numbers, I have rank and age, I have height, which has got a nice unit for me. Now let's say I want to calculate, let's see, maybe their age in dog years. Age in dog years. And so in dog years. They always say that's 7 times larger, so our units here are going to be a year, or years if you like. And so I'm going to say it equals my age times 7. And sometimes you could have different functions that you're creating. And I'm going to, again, instead of scrolling down, I'm actually going to show another one, which is, so I could scroll down and fill this up, or I can actually click here and double click on the right on that same thing, and it also populates to the last row that it sees based on the last row it sees based on the column to the left. And again, I could make that bigger. So now I have a bunch of data, and this is an excellent table. Maybe I could go and print this. I can even hit Control Copy, and I can go into things like Microsoft Office or Word, and I can save and paste. It goes directly into other functions really nicely. But let's say now I want to, maybe, I guess I'm going to add one more thing to my table just to show you how to make these things. I'm going to do an index, or maybe we'll even say seat number. And since we're in COVID edition here of this class, or we've had COVID, we want to keep them 6 feet apart. So I'm going to have my first person sit right here in front center, or seat distance. Maybe we'll just say that. Seat distance. And this is going to be in feet. We can even say from front. From front. So I'm going to start with 0, and I'm going to say I want the next person to be 7 feet behind, or 6 feet behind the first one. So I'm going to hit the up arrow and click on that first number. And I'm going to say I want that plus 6 feet. Okay. And now I could click and drag, or I can also double click and it will go to the last row that it sees. If I ever find out later on, I'm going to put distance to or between seats. You can even have units. It's helpful to do that in feet. Maybe I want that distance. Right now it's at 6, so I can auto update this. I'm going to make that now 6, right? And if I click on it and drag down, the problem I get is it's starting to move the box with it. I don't want that. I want to fix that number 6. And the reason I want to do that is because I always want every row to be checking back at that. One trick is you could hit function F4 and it brings up these dollar signs. The dollar signs represent that it is a fixed reference. The 1 in front of the D means I'm going to fix the D, and the dollar sign in front of the 1 means I'm going to fix the 1, so column fixed and row fixed. You can also keep hitting function F4, and it goes through a series of these where right now it's fixing just the row, or if I hit it again, it's going to fix just the column, or if I hit it once more, it takes that all off. Okay, when you have both of them fixed, it's considered an absolute reference. If you have just one of them fixed, it's called a relative reference. And for something like this where it's always the same number, you could do the absolute where both are fixed. I'm going to demonstrate if I just hit this once more, it's going to fix the row. And I'm going to just show that I can actually take this down, and I can always click on here to double check. If you click into the formula bar, it also color codes it, and I can see, yep, that's right. It's always looking at row 1, location D, which is nice. Now the reason I'm saying that is it's helpful to have an absolute reference when you're doing something like this, because if you ever want to go back in and again change something, you could say, oh, maybe it's not 6 anymore. Some new study came out and it's 17 feet. I can even do that here. So it auto updates it all. All right, so now I have a lot of information, and let's say I want to start making a plot of this. Someone asked you to put a graph. So there are a lot of different types of graphs. They're typically under the insert section or the ribbon, and then they call them charts in Excel. The most common one you're going to do is called a scatter plot or a scatter chart. It is often confused with the line chart, and I will try and show both of those for you so that you can see what that means. Let's start with the group names and the favorite number. So if I just want to plot the name versus the number, if I make a scatter plot, I'm going to hit scatter plot, and when you click on this or even on the arrow, you can see choices. We could have dots by themselves, you could have curvy lines or rigid lines. You could also remove the dots on the curvy or the rigid line format. Most of engineering, we tend to do the dots and the rigid lines unless for some other reason we need something else. But I'm going to pick that one first, and you'll see it created a chart for me, already, and it put all the dots in here. It has values on the X and values on the Y. For every engineering graph you make, you will need to have the X-axis and the Y-axis labeled, again, unless someone tells you otherwise. So up here, whenever you click on the chart itself, it will bring up an extra ribbon called Chart Tools, and under Design tab, we can add elements. So I'm going to add the axes titles in the horizontal, and I can even start typing it, because while it's highlighted, you can type. I'm going to say this was the group names, and I'm going to add the title to the vertical, which was the favorite number. Okay. This is called a scatter plot. Right, I'll even change. This is up here is the title of this. You can click on it, you can scroll over it, and I can change this. Scatter plot here. Some things I want to point out about the scatter plot. As you see, right now I have group names, and it shows numbers, and that does not make sense. For a scatter plot, if I'm going to do words at the bottom, you probably don't really want a scatter plot. All right, this is better if you actually have X values and Y values along here. So I'm going to just hit Control C for a moment and then Control V. So I'm going to copy it and paste it. Let's try a different one. I'm going to call this now a line chart or line graph. Let's do line chart for a moment. And I'm going to click on my chart space and I'm going to go into the design. And instead of looking over here at the elements, I'm going to go over here to the right and say I want to change my chart type. And I'm going to make it a line chart. Okay, there's a lot of different types here. I'm going to pick a line. Okay, I'm going to say OK. So now I've created a line chart. If you see, it's the same graph. I can even have it with the dots. Let me come back in here. I can change my type that I can have the dots with it. Markers. Okay, so it looks almost identical. Differences here now is if I have text as my X values, it shows each text down here. The other thing is it eliminates the 0 because that didn't make sense when I have names. And otherwise, everything else looks the same. I'm going to come to my scatter plot. Let me move some of these around. You can click and drag them. And I'm going to now hit Control Copy. And up here, I'm going to say Control Paste. Now I'm going to do a scatter plot again, but instead of doing the X values, maybe I want to do the distance from the front of the class. Okay, so you can click again anywhere in this chart space. I can do it either by, while it's highlighted, as my mouse goes over it, it goes from a plus sign to these arrows. That means I can grab it and move it. So I'm going to click and hold and grab. Okay. And right now it only lets me go up and down to pick different values. I can click and grab these and change them, but not my X values. What I can do instead, if I want to make my X values different, is I can also click on this plotted space, go back into design, and on the right hand side I have select data. Okay. This brings up a new menu where it shows the range of information. It also says right now I'm plotting something called favorite number. I'm going to click on here and say edit. For every thing you plot, this is called a series, each line of information that I have. And I can change the name of the series. Because when I originally scrolled over it, I had group names, favorite number, all the way down. It guessed that the first thing here was the title of my information, and which was correct. If you ever just scroll over the numbers, it may, I believe it doesn't even have a series name. Let's just call it series 1. by default. So you can always add a name here too if you wanted. You could even go in here, you could hit delete, and you could say this was favorite number if that was if you didn't have something to click. This one's nice because you could also click on something that's actually on the page. As I mentioned, I'm going to change this to seat distance from the front. And on the X values, I now want those to be, froze for a moment, these values from 0 to the 85. And I can click on this little button to get back to my main options. All right, my Y values, you could always check it again. It is the values I wanted. That's great. So I'm gonna, oh geez, that's not so fun. Okay, now I got out of it. And so it shows my series data here, and I'm gonna hit OK. Now this is still a scatter plot, and now I'm showing the values of the distance. I need to update my x-axis value. So I'm going to, again, just click here, click on it, and I'm going to say seat distance from the front, and that was again in feet. Always put a unit if there's a unit. And now I'm showing favorite number versus seat distance, which is really cool. All right, the other thing I'm going to show now is what if I wanted to also show more of this other information. I can go back into here and say design, select data. The other way to get to this too is you can right click on it, and they have select data also in the right click option menu. Brings up the same table. Now I'm going to add another series. So let's say I want to add height as my next series. So my X values, I'm going to keep them the same because there's no logic to changing that. So from 0 to 85. And then on the Y, I'm going to go over my height values. Okay. I'm going to say OK. Now I want to, make sure everything's right. Okay. So now I have height. That is not what these numbers are showing, but they are a value that are kind of similar. In something like this where I have a different y-axis or a series with a different y scale, I can actually make this a secondary axis. So if you click on one of these, it says, by the way, up here in that formula bar, it gives me the actual function, which is series, that plots a series. The first term here before the column says you're looking on tab sheet 2, and then they have an exclamation mark to say that's the end of the location, and it's looking at A3. It has the dollar signs to fix it, but that is the name of the series. The second one is your X values, and then your Y values. Okay. I'm going to double click on this, and it brings up a menu to look at changing some functions on this page. The other way to get to this is you could also go into Format. Let me get out of here. You could also click on the thing you're looking at, whether it's a series, a table, an axis label. You could also click on the grid lines, which are the gray lines in the background. All of those you can edit and change. I'm going to click on the series for now and just say Format. Right now it's showing me series. And again, you could click on one of those other things. Maybe you want those grid lines again. You can click on them. Go back to my series. We were on the seat. Okay. I'm going to hit Format Selection, and it brings up that menu again. So in here, I can change things like color of my series. I can change the line. If maybe I didn't want that blue, I wanted it, red or something different. I'll click out here in the space. You can see that the lines are now red. I can even change in there the type of line or the way it looks if I wanted it dashed and dotted. You can change the marker, and that could be maybe I want a different shape. Right now it's a circle by default. I can change the shape by going to marker options and saying, oh, I want it square, for example. Okay. And I can do, you can make different sizes and other things related to that. I'm going to click on the second one and just show when I first click on it and I'm in this formatting menu. And the other way again to get to that is you could go up here and you could, if I was on the seat distance series, I could always go also here and say height. Now one of the other things, so again there's colors, you can change the way it looks. I don't know any engineer who actually changes the shadowing and other effects. That's just distraction. And then we have the bar chart looking symbol. This allows me to change between primary and secondary axis. So I'm going to click secondary axis for this one. Maybe. There it goes. And now it starts another y-axis on the right. Okay. And this is what I'd like to see for something that has a different y-axis and a different scale. So I'm going to click on this again, and I can look at it. I can add also to any of these axes, I can change the range. Maybe I wanted this to actually go from 50 to 70. Again, these are inches. And you can change tick marks, like what side they go to. You can change labels. You can change what kind of number it looks like. But I'm going to go back into here and add my label, because again, for any axes you have, you should pretty much always label your axes. So I'm going to add a title. Now that I have a secondary axis available, it shows me the other options. We have a secondary vertical here. I did not change my x-axis, but if you had different x values associated with that one, you could also relabel that. So I'm going to say this was, again, I forgot what I even called it. So this was height, right? Inches. And I can do that. So I can have a graph here again showing height of these various people. Now I want to click on some of these, for example. Right, there's a 56 and a 66. Let's click on one of these. Sorry. So I have, let's look at, oh, I know what I was going to do. Sorry. Let's create another graph because this one is a little bit easier. I'm going to create a second one. So I just hit Control Copy again. You could also, let me just show this too. You could also create a new graph by just selecting data. So maybe now I want to compare the height versus the age in dog years. All right. So I'm going to scroll over these two data points and I'm going to say I want to insert a graph, and I can do scatter plot this way. You could also right click and I could say insert, there's in here somewhere is this graph I thought, but maybe I forgot it. All right. Where do you go up here? Insert chart. So insert a scatter plot. Now, in a lot of engineering, at least when you go to report, we tend to delete the title of these because the chart titles, because we often in reporting actually just want to have a figure caption at the bottom of your text when you're writing your document. So I'm actually just going to delete that chart title. And now I need to remember which ones they were. So I'm going to go in here and say axes titles, add my horizontal, which I believe was height in inches. And you could always go check on this again, check your numbers. And I'm going to add a vertical, and here was age, say dog age in years. All right. Now the reason I picked on this one, for example, as opposed to scatter plot, is I want to show that the difference between a scatter plot and a line is, I'm going to move these again, kind of out of the way. So this is my scatter plot. Maybe I will put a title back on here for a moment. Scatter of height versus age. And I'm going to just, again, hit Control Copy, Control Paste. I'm going to change this back to a line chart. And what I want to point out here on why we don't use line charts for when you have X values is this is going in order as it appeared in your information. So we have this bumpy number. It doesn't make sense that we can't draw a trend line or anything from this. It's kind of confusing. So let me relabel this, sorry. This is a line chart of height versus age. Not useful for trend lines. Right. So the scatter plots are the preferred ones here because what happens is now I am actually truly plotting height versus age, where I can even click on these and I can see, let me click on a single data point here. If I put my mouse over it, it will even give me a point. Here it's saying this is 56 to 7, and again it's increasing numerically correctly on the x-axis now. We can add things to these, by the way. You can add a trend line. If I go up to format, all right, I guess what I usually do, is I usually right click on it and I say insert a trend line. But it can be one, go back to design here for a moment too. We can add it as an element and say I'd like a trend line. This is something where it's helpful to know what your trend line is supposed to look like, if it's going to be linear or exponential, or you can do other ones. I can format my trend line, and on the bar chart looking thing I can change it to even like a polynomial or a power function, if that made sense. You can turn on features in here such as show the equation, and let me click on it again. You can also even turn on a thing called an R² value, which gives you how close your data points are to fitting this. An R² of 1 means it's an exact match. An R² of something lower means it's not that great of a match. Let me also in here, let's do something like I had just previously done. I'm going to add another line. Let's add that age by itself, or the rank in age. So I'm going to do the X values as the height, the Y values as these ages, and okay, get back to my graph. All right. Oh, I know what I was going to do. Let's reverse this. I'm going to undo that. I just had that graph here. I'm going to create a graph that maybe my teachers told me I needed to go the other direction. So I'm going to do scatter of age versus height. And you can also do that here by switching the row and the column would be switching this way, but I actually just want to switch the order. So I'm going to go back to select data, hit edit, and you can, maybe I wanted this to be F That way F is age, this to be E. You can either type it in or you can also click on these and scroll over the data. Okay. Now, it didn't do too much here, except I now need to relabel everything. So height, inches. This is dog age in years. And part of the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to also, I'm going to add that second series here. I'm trying to show you guys what age versus age would look like. So I have that one on the x-axis, this one now in my y. Okay. And there we go. So I'm going to go into here again and say that let's just make that a secondary axis. And I'm going to add my secondary here and say this is called my original age in years. So something like this, if I do a trend line, add the trend line, and I go into my features of my trend line. Let's go back into that. I can add something like the equation or even r squared on that, and you'll see again, when I match it exactly, it gets an r squared of 1. That means it's the best fit, and it gives me the equation of that. Let's just play around with some of this though and show you how it also updates live. So let's say I have an initial or a pre-age adjust in years. And let's just add 3 years to everybody. So I'm going to do, let's see, probably the fastest way to do that would be to just copy this one for a moment. Copy, paste. And I'm going to say now I want this to be 5 plus 3 years. And again, I'm going to fix it by hitting function F4. So I'm going to add 3 years to everything. It auto updates also my age, right? And so all of that gets fixed. The downside of doing that is my trend line needs to, maybe I won't do that. Let me do this from these numbers. There we go. You can see what happens to these. Let's do my trend line here. And that's good. Okay. So again, when I adjusted it, now I have one with a y-intercept, and it still has an r squared of 1 because it's the best fit, the orange line. Unfortunately, this doesn't color code it. Personally, when I do something like this, I also like to color code my trend line information. So I will remember this was orange. I'll tell it to be orange. And this one was the blue line, so I'm going to go in here and tell it to be the blue line, just so that later it's easier for myself to see it. Another feature that's really almost a requirement whenever you plot is to add a legend. So that's again in design, you add an element, and we're going to add the legend. And you can put it anywhere unless someone specifies that, but most people tend not to specify. And you can move these things around here. So the reason we do a legend is, again, it's hard to tell what these graphs are showing us, and this helps the reader identify which line is which, because once you print it, we can't click on it. to read what's going on. So I'm going to also, when you want to print these, it's very helpful to have the lines be different and the markers be different in color or shape. So I'm going to click on just one of these. Right now it's picking a trend line. I'm going to make one of those trend lines different. Okay, a different dashed system at least, so that it shows up here, even in the legend, as being different. I'm going to change the shape of one of these to a different, because they're both circles. Those also, when you print them, tend to look alike. I'm going to make one of them a different marker. And I'm going to just pick a different shape. So again, if somebody were to print this now, hopefully they can see that the blue has dots kind of all over the place and the orange doesn't. You can even make these orange ones more transparent, not the trend line. So I'm going to go in here and maybe I want my markers to not be filled. Okay. The reason I also am doing that is then you can see the blue dot behind it, which is kind of helpful. All right, so with that, I'm going to sign off on that, and this is how we do graphing. I'm going to have a third video if you're ever interested in, which will go through maybe some more advanced features that you can do in Excel, particularly things that are helpful when you're trying to do your weighted design requirement chart. So I'm going to sign off on this and see you on a different visit.